Hello, everyone. I'm Father Scott Vanderveer here with another installment in our series on 33 days toward consecration to the Eucharist. I was an exchange student in my 20s. I was in an international traveling group called Up With People, and it was kind of like the Peace Corps, but with a show. Maybe some of the work we did wasn't quite as in-depth as what the Peace Corps does, if I'm honest, but we intended to do community service work in every community that we visited all over the world. I got to go to something like 9 different countries with Up With People. I lived in 150 different host families. We did community service work, and we performed a musical, kind of like a Broadway-style high school musical, but with 150 people on stage from 25 different countries and 16 tons of equipment. It was really something. When Up With People would come to a town, we would often go to the local theater or to the local high school or venue like that, and we would put together our show. We put the stage together with its 16 tons of equipment. We would sell tickets and then be sure to give people a show that they never forgot. On the way out of town, we were often taking off our show costumes, putting on our regular clothes, striking the set, and then climbing on the bus to go to the next town. And I remember feeling uncomfortable feelings sometimes when we were leaving the show facility. Sometimes I would look at the garbage cans overflowing with garbage, or with the locker room all kind of, every locker door open and kind of feeling as if we had come in and shaken things up, and now we were leaving without necessarily noticing that so much had been done for us. It made me want to pause and thank the locker room for hosting us. Thank the stage for holding our weight. Thank the town for allowing our buses to drive on their roads. In short, I did not want to be a tourist in the towns we visited. I did not want to be someone who was a taker. I wanted to be a pilgrim. I wanted to be on a sacred journey through all of the towns and countries that we visited. And I wanted to leave appreciation in the wake of where we had been. I thought Matthew Kelly did a really, really good job in this chapter describing the difference between pilgrims and tourists. Pilgrims are on a sacred journey. Pilgrims are willing to suffer for the experiences that they're having, knowing that the suffering or the struggle is part of the gift. Pilgrims are willing to leave things better than they found them. Pilgrims are hoping that the places they visit will have been touched by the grace of their visit, just as the pilgrim leaves being touched by the grace of the place. Matthew Kelly encourages us to consider that we are all pilgrims, and that not only is a parish trip to a place like Italy or Fatima a pilgrimage, not only is going to St. Anne de Beaupré in Quebec and going up holy stairs on our knees, that's not the only kind of pilgrimage there is. Life is a pilgrimage. We come from beyond. We're brought here by God's invitation through no credit to us. We live our lives here on this planet with as much fidelity and strength and integrity as we can. And then, when the time is right, we make our way home. We don't get to determine when that will be. That is God's decision, as so much else is. I find myself very persuaded by Matthew Kelly's good instruction and suggestion that we consider the last things. We consider that the best case scenario for our life here on earth is that we age and get very old and die happy. But staying here is not an option. Staying young is not an option. Avoiding suffering and struggle, not an option. That's not going to be open to us. Whatever we do with this life, we're going to have to do on life's terms, not ours. So I think there's something so powerful about the fact that in the early Christian tradition, there was often a skull at the base of the cross. It wasn't a historical thing. There wasn't a skull at the base of Jesus' cross, although the place where he was crucified was called Golgotha, the place of the skull. But that was meant to make it clear that it was a place of death and that it was a place of crucifixion and the form of capital punishment preferred by the Romans at that time. But I think it's interesting for us to recognize that the skull was there so that the person who was looking at the crucifix would know, you too, you and me, we will die. No one gets out of life alive. That's what makes this such an adventure. That's how we know for sure this is a pilgrimage. None of us gets out of life alive. That is a beautiful and maybe a little bit sobering reality for us to ponder. How are we using this one wild, precious life of ours to be utterly aware that we will not get out of this alive? We must always be working on our connection to God and our connection to heaven because it is our true home. God is our true source and the summit of our whole lives. That's what we call the Eucharist because it is our connection to God's body, blood, soul, and divinity. We call it the source and the summit of human life. And God is the one from whom we come and the one to whom we are going. So it makes sense that we would spend a lot of our time on this pilgrimage communicating with God, writing postcards from the journey, that we would be constantly recognizing that it was up to God to direct and guide us, that we must be seeking God's guidance and discernment. A lot of times that means that prayer is not just something we do to feel good or to feel connected or uplifted. Prayer is something we do because it is an essential part of pilgrimage. It is like making calls home, like calling ahead to the next hotel that we're going to make sure that our reservation is confirmed. We must always be connecting with the one who made us, who invited us on this pilgrimage, and who is the destination. They say that one of the gifts of having a hard time praying, if we're having a dryness in prayer, as some people call it, if we're experiencing prayer not being very rewarding and not feeling very, juicy, good, wonderful God feelings when we pray, we're encouraged to know that that is actually a beautiful and purifying thing. It's causing us to remember that prayer, in its essence, is not for us. It's not to feel good. It's not therapeutic, although it often can be. The goal of prayer is to connect with God. And so if we were only willing to do that when it felt good to us, when we got good, wonderful, juicy, happy vibe feelings from it, we would no longer be able to know if the reason we were doing it was because we loved God or because we liked the way it made us feel. So that's a pretty powerful reason to not be afraid when prayer is hard or when we sit down to do it and when we get up, we don't feel any better than we did when we sat down. There's something really holy about that. Farmers have said that the best time for there to be a lack of rain is a while after the corn gets planted, but quite a ways before it gets harvested. You want there to be enough rain, the farmers say, during the planting and seeding season that that the shoots can take root, that you can have a crop come up. If you put it in just dry soil and the rain never comes, it'll just shrivel up. But if it has enough water in the beginning to form those shoots and send them into the ground, then it's very good for the corn to go through a period of dryness and stress. And they say that's because if the corn has it too easy at that stage of growth, it'll just send shallow little roots out into the dirt that won't really help the corn to be able to survive in hard times. If, however, it's dry not long after the corn is planted, that forces the corn to send deep roots, to find water in the depth beneath the soil, to go beneath the surface level to get to where the good, deep aquifers are. That corn is going to survive many more things than the corn that had it easy early in the planting season and then didn't have the kind of roots that could nourish it during the hard times. I find that to be such an important image for us to work with. I think there's something huge for us to chew on there. Our prayer is like that too. If we don't have hard times in prayer, we won't send the roots deep enough to be able to get to the living water that God has at the depths of things. We can't always just get the easier to access comforts of life. Those things will be there, and thank goodness for them. But we can't depend on that to be the only way that we get through things. We have to be able to weather harder storms, get through worse droughts. And that's why it's a good thing for baby corn to experience some dryness and stress. So, we are pilgrims, friends, and the journey is arduous, but boy, is it glorious. Thank you for joining me on this particular part of the pilgrimage, considering the Eucharist and our commitment to God, no matter the cost. May God bless you all.